r/no sleep. User, standard climate 5724. The man in the window. I always found solace in the night. It was quiet, a time when the world seemed to pause and let me catch my breath. My small apartment, tucked away on the top floor of a creaky old building, became a haven when darkness fell. The street outside was usually deserted by then, leaving only the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves to keep me company. That's why I noticed him right away. The man standing in the window of the building across the street. It started about a month ago. I was sitting at my desk, a cup of tea steaming beside me, when I glanced out the window. The apartment opposite mine had always been vacant, the windows arc and lifeless, but that night, a dim light glowed from within, casting a faint silhouette against the glass. At first, I thought nothing of it. Someone had moved in, I figured, but as the days passed, I realized something was off. The man was always there, always standing in the exact same spot, staring out the window. He never moved, never shifted, just stood there with his face obscured by the shadows. I couldn't make out any details, no features. No expression, just the dark outline of a figure. I told myself it was nothing to worry about. Maybe he was a night owl like me, someone who found comfort in the quiet hours. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to feel uneasy. There was something unsettling about the way he never moved, never reacted. As if he were a statue rather than a person. One night, I decided to wave. It felt silly, childish even, but I wanted to see if he would respond. I raised my hand and gave a small tentative wave, half expecting him to wave back. He didn't. Instead, he remained perfectly still, staring straight ahead as if he hadn't noticed me at all. The light from his apartment flickered slightly, casting strange, shifting shadows across his face. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly pulled the curtains shut, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. I didn't look out the window for a few days after that. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just some guy minding his own business. But the image of him standing there, unmoving, stayed with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. Then one night, I heard tapping. It was a soft, rhythmic sound, like fingernails lightly tapping against glass. I was in bed, just about to drift off to sleep, when the noise pulled me back to consciousness. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, maybe a branch, scraping against the window. But as I listened more closely, I realized it was coming from inside the apartment, right outside my bedroom window. My heart began to race, and I forced myself to get out of bed. The tapping continued, steady and insistent. As I crept toward the window, my hands were trembling as I reached for the curtain, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. Slowly, I pulled the curtain aside and peered out. There was nothing there. No branches, no birds, nothing that could have caused the noise. The street below was empty, the only light coming from the street lamp a few yards down. But as I scanned the windows of the building across the street, my breath caught in my throat. He was gone. The man in the window was no longer there. The light in his apartment had gone out, leaving nothing but darkness behind. I stared at the empty window for what felt like hours, my mind racing with questions. Where had he gone? Had he finally moved? Or was he still there, hidden in the shadows, watching me? I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, that maybe he had just left the apartment or gone to bed. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The tapping had stopped, but the sense of unease only grew stronger. The next night, I stayed up late, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The hours ticked by, and the apartment across the street remained dark. But just as I was about to turn in for the night, I heard the tapping again. This time, it was louder, more urgent. I bolted upright in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound echoed through the room, filing the silence with a relentless rhythm that set my nerves on edge. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me to stay away from the window. To hide under the covers and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But the tapping persisted, driving me to the brink of panic. I had to know. With trembling hands, I threw the curtains open and screamed. He was there, standing on the fire escape right outside my window. his face pressed against the glass. I stumbled back, my scream catching in my throat as I stared at the figure before me. It was the man from the window, but now, I could see him clearly. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were all black, empty voids that seemed to swallow the light around them. His mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile, teeth bared in a silent snarl. He raised one hand and tapped the glass with a long, bony finger, the sound echoing in my ears like a death knell. I backed away, my mind reeling with terror. How had he gotten there? How long had he been watching me? The questions swirled in my head, but I had no answers. All I knew was that I had to get out. I grabbed my phone and ran out the bedroom, my hands shaking so badly could barely dial 911. I locked myself in the bathroom, my back pressed against the door as I waited for the operator to pick up. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man outside my window, I gasped, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. He's on the fire escape. He's trying to get in. The operator's voice was calm, too calm. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Can you describe the man? I hesitated, my mind struggling to form coherent thoughts. How could I describe something so unnatural? So wrong. He's pale, I stammered. His eyes, they are black. Completely black. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a pause that felt like an eternity. Ma'am, are you sure he's still there? I listened, my ears straining to catch any sound from the other side of the door. The tapping had stopped, and the apartment was eerily silent. I don't know, I whispered. I can't hear anything. Stay where you are, the operator instructed. The officers will be there soon. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, my body trembling with fear. Minutes passed, each one dragging on longer than the last, until finally, I heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Ma'am, this is the police. Can you open the door? I unlocked the bathroom door with shaking hands and peered out. 2 officers stood in the living room, their expressions a mix of concern and confusion. He was right there, I said, pointing toward the bedroom, on the fire escape. The officers exchanged a glance before one of them nodded and headed towards the window. I stayed in the doorway, my heart still racing, as the other officer gently questioned me. But when the first officer returned, his face was pale. There's no one out there, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What? I gasped. That's impossible. He was just there. I saw him. The officer shook his head. There's no sign of anyone. The fire escape doesn't even go down to the street. It's blocked off. No one could have gotten up here. My blood ran cold. But I saw him, I insisted, my voice trembling. He was right outside my window. I heard him tapping. The officers exchanged another look, this one more serious. They stayed with me for a while longer, searching the apartment and checking the building, but they found nothing. Nothing of forced entry. No evidence that anyone had been on the fire escape. Eventually, they left, advising me to keep my windows locked and call if I saw anything suspicious. But even as they walked out the door, I could see doubt in their eyes. They didn't believe me. They thought I was just another paranoid woman with an overactive imagination. But I knew what I saw. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, every light in the apartment turned on, my eyes glued to the window. But the man never returned. The tapping didn't come back. In the days that followed, I did everything I could to put the experience behind me. I threw myself into work, spent more time with friends, anything to keep my mind off what had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A week later, I moved out of the apartment. I couldn't stay there any longer, not with the memory of those black eyes burned into my mind. I found a new place across town, a high-rise building with no fire escapes. No dark windows to stare out of. For a while, it worked. The nightmares faded, the paranoia eased, and I started to feel like myself again. But every now and then, when I'm laying in bed late at night, I'll hear a soft tapping on the glass. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remind me that he's still out there somewhere, watching. And I know that one day, he'll come back.